live? Nice. Yeah.
Live.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Military Veteran Family YouTube channel here. My name is Jesse Almanza, retired gunnery sergeant, United States Marine Corps. And to my left, military left.
Your military left. That
Military
would
left.
that would be me. I am Charles Prentice. Not retired. I just got out. United States Air Force disabled veteran.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about today. I've got a topic. Well, we have a topic that we're going to be discussing, and it has to deal with the entire family, not just the veteran or the veteran spouse or whatever, but your sons, your daughters, moms, dads, everyone. I mean,
Hmm.
we all need this subject matter, and I think because I've had conversations with other folks in the last few weeks about this subject matter here, I think it's important to talk about it because a lot of military veterans fail to, and I say fail because it's truth, fail to bring out all of your experience that you have had in the military to help you do or get what we call a job or a job, because a job is a job. And
Is
a
a
job is a
job.
job. It's a job. A
That's
job is
right.
a job. We all have a job. And you have paid jobs, and then you have honeydew jobs, and then you have all kinds of jobs. But this particular one we're going to talk about is going to be a paid job.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's important because we all need to get paid to do our work. But let me ask you a question. I think I kind of brought this up previously in our other channels, but some of the stuff that we talked about, I just kind of touched bases on it because I'm opening up for bigger and better or more information to bring to you. And if you have your sons and daughters, if they're listening into this podcast here or this channel,
Streaming.
podcast streaming, I'm still kind of trying to get the verbiage on all of this stuff here. All I know is it's technology that kind of caught up to me, and we're still trying to catch up to it. So,
It passed us by,
yeah.
and we're fighting to grab a hold. And
Yeah. This AI stuff really has me freaked out, though. I'm sure it's got you freaked out as well, too. But anyway, job security. When you talk about a job, when you get a job, Charles, when we had a job in the military, the only reason why we kept that job, unless we blow it because we did something very, very bad, it's because we signed up for so many years.
Yep.
It was guaranteed for so many years that we were going to have a job.
Yep.
So that was our job security, whether it was a couple of years, 3 years, and 4 years max or 6 years max, I think it was when we first started off with. And then you do your 4 years active duty, and then you do your reservist for 2 years. But that was job security. So you had a job. You were going to be, unless you blew it for some reason, you had job security for that amount of time.
Well, I mean, you have to look at it this way, also, Jesse. We were considered government issue, so
GI,
We were owned by the United States government.
GI. Yeah, we
So
were GI.
if the world hadn't ended and the sun came up in the morning, you knew you had to go into work.
That's
You threw
right.
on the
That's right.
uniform,
That's right. And
and
GIs, government issue GIs. That's who we are. We're GIs. Well, job security is the no such thing, because eventually we're going to end our contract, and eventually we're going to step out, and we're going to move forward, and we have to get a job.
hmm
We have to, because I mean we've got to pay bills, we've got to eat, we've got to live, we have to have a place to stay. If we got kids, we've got to make sure that our kids are taken care of.
hmm
And along with that job comes, what is it that you're going to need out of that job that's going to suffice your needs. It's going to be able to be good for your needs. For example, food. Obviously, you have to have a place to stay, a home. You have to have medical insurance, because if you get sick, you break a leg or something, your kids, we got to take them to the doctor, and we have to pay for it. And the job obviously is going to pay for that.
hmm
So we have to look to the future when we do get a job. So, and my meaning a while ago is that job security itself is that if we get out of the military, we're not actually secured anymore.
Right.
You know. However, when we get out of the military, we have gained all of this experience while we're in. I call it an MOS, and other branches call it something else.
Yeah.
Military occupational specialist or status or whatever, MOS.
Yeah.
So I
Air
was a
Force. Air Force is AFSC.
yeah, so I was a driver, I'll start with that, not a diver, but a driver. And I drove for my first few years in the military, Charles. I drove. I drove the Jeeps. I drove the Deuce and a Halves back in the day, the 5 tons later on, the Dragon wagons and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
along the line, buses, big old Continental buses and tour buses and stuff. Drove all that. So that was my experience that I had when I was in the military. So, and let's say I just put in my 4 years
Okay.
and I got out of the military in 4 years and I'm looking for a job.
Yeah.
Okay, my experience getting out of the job is my motor vehicle experience.
Right.
I can go right back in, as I know many of militaries do that. Military veterans. If you're in Motor T, you're truck drivers now. You buy your own rig, and you're out there doing your own travels, and that's your job security. And as long as you can do it, because that's pretty much my definition, me against the world again, is the ability to be able to perform.
Right.
If you can do that, you have a job.
So I just have real quick, and
Sure.
it's on topic but off topic. So you learned to drive like the big huge tour type buses.
Hmm. I
So
did.
after you, if you would have just stayed 4 years and having that skill set would have got out, you could have wore the military dress blues, because that's what our ugly military Air Force military uniform looks like, a bus driver's outfit. So back in the day, they used to wear that bus driver suit.
Right, right. The
So
uniform type
so
thing.
you
Yeah.
would have basically went from a Marine Corps uniform to a simulated close enough, really ugly,
Yeah.
and so if the United States Air Force commander of the United States Air Force is paying attention, if you click into this and you listen to this part, change the stupid blues for the United States Air Force, because it's a bus driver's uniform and it's ugly. It is the ugliest uniform out there. I watched when I got home. We had a wonderful Memorial Day service, but I went home and watched some of the Memorial Day services, and they did each military branch, including the Space Force. And the Space Force has a better looking uniform than the
Oh,
ugly
that's
United
sharp,
States Air
sharp uniform.
Force blues. Change it. But that's what you could have gone into. You could have actually been civilian
Yeah, yeah.
bus driver. But
Right.
that is training that you had, that you thinking about
That's
now,
true.
that you go,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I didn't even think
You
that,
didn't think about that. Yeah, you become a driver. You're wearing the other hat. Remember that session? But I also want to remind each and every one of you that this is about telling your story. This is about
Mhm.
telling what you think and what you believe. Charles has put a good example out there is because now we have the ability to be able to speak out and say
Yep.
what we want to say. Change that uniform,
Change
Air
that
Force.
ugly
Yeah,
Air
change it.
Force. I
So,
guarantee you, if you talk to Air Force veterans and current Air Force active duty,
yeah,
reserve, they will all go, yeah, we have the ugliest dress
yeah.
uniform
Uh,
out of all services. The ugliest.
all right. We beat that one to death. It's ugly. Okay, here we go. So we got out of the military, and I'm using my MOS for
Hmm.
example. I'm a driver. I've had 4 years experience, even though I spent 23 years in the military. But let's say I just spent 4 years, and I've got that experience. So I'm looking for another job coming out, and I've got that experience. I can drive. I can drive a car. I can drive a Cadillac. I can drive a limousine. I can be a chauffeur. I can be a bus driver. I can be anything. I can have a job because I have the ability to be able to perform. That's my job security.
Hmm.
So, but I remember one time getting hurt on the job, and something happened to where I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't drive, and I was a young PFC Lance Corporal per se, and I couldn't drive because I was injured. I had a tennis shoe boo boo, what they call it in the Marine Corps, tennis shoe boo boo, and I couldn't go nowhere. Okay,
Okay.
so I had to work in the tool shop. You know that, in the tool shop where every driver that comes in. needs to check out tools for when they go out on the road. They have a jack because all that stuff has to be turned in at the end.
Okay.
You have a jack, you have water, you have gas cans, you have cables, chains if you're going to go out in the snow. You have to check all that out of the tool shed, right?
All right.
So being in the tool shed didn't really make me just a tool shed person. What it made me responsible for the cost of all of this equipment that was sitting in the tool shed.
All right.
So when you're talking about experience that you've had and you're applying for a job outside of the military and you think all you can do is drive, imagine the hundreds of millions of dollars that you had to coordinate, take care of, and account for when you were doing that. Just working in a tool shop.
Mm-hmm.
So in hindsight, looking at it that way, you can say, wow, I really have that much more experience. And that's where I say that we fail to talk about things that we've done when we're applying for a job or trying to get a job on experiences that we've had. And we have experience. Now I could be applying for an accounting position and I could be a driver, but the accounting position experience could identify all the money that I had control on. It wasn't physical money, but it was inventory money. It was stuff that cost the federal government a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just use that, if you were in supply, for example, you think you were just issuing out sandbags and all that other good stuff? How many millions of dollars were you responsible for when you were actually working in supply? How many millions of dollars? Where is that on your resume? Where is that when you're applying for that position? Responsible for this, responsible for that, and manage this and coordinated that, and had to do inventory, and had to issue out and had to ensure that it returned. And there's more experience to what you've done. You operated. You were in big airplanes, Charles. You
Yeah,
had, yeah.
yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well. Mine is the other. Because you were talking about tools, and we had what is called PMEL, which is Precision Military Equipment listings, and so we had you know oscopes and all with ours is especially working the camera systems that I worked when I was
How
at
expensive
Beale.
were those camera systems?
Well,
How
considering they
much?
were on the SR and the U2, quite a
Million,
bit,
millions. You were
millions of
responsible.
dollars. But I was also responsible for the equipment that we connected to that
Ah,
equipment. We have consoles that had some of this equipment that had to go in and be recalibrated all the time.
ah,
So I had listings of all this stuff and when it had to be done and what
mm,
the calibrations were supposed to be to. So you're taking them to, it's a different organization that does all the calibrations in the listings, but it's still you're in charge of that. You know how much and what time and what it's supposed to do. If it comes to this equipment is bad, you're the one that has to reorder this equipment. It's
okay.
not okay, well, somebody else reorders now. No, you're in charge of all that equipment. So you turn it around. So, but that was like you're talking about. When I got out, that's not one of the things that I was thinking about.
Ah, well, see,
Um,
that's the thing is that we have to think about these things
mhm,
because experience and skill sets equate to more income,
mhm,
more money. And if you're just gonna say I can drive and you're just going to be able to get the minimal amount of time for driving and you've got all this other experience, I mean, somewhere along the line maybe you might end up getting hired for the job, right?
mhm.
Let's say you get hired for the job to go drive someplace, a bus somewhere, and then all of a sudden as you're working in that job, this is where it counts more is because we always have the ability to be able to grow into that position. It's if we like the job, and maybe we just don't like the place, but we're there. But we're there because, and let's say I'm a fork driver at a place, and that's all I do all day long, drive a forklift,
That's
and I can
actually
operate a forklift.
that's actually some good
Yeah,
money.
yeah. Well, depending on where you're working
Yeah,
at. If you're working at Costco, I don't know, what driving a
that's
fork. But here's the thing, though, there's people out there that are going to watch what you do and how you do it. You report it in on time. You're being specific. Your attention to detail. Now you're showing your true colors here, because this is what you learn in the military. You've got to be precise. You've got to be to the point to where you're taking care of the equipment, and this is where you make yourself known as, I'd like to be able to do more. I'd like to be able to do, not only operate the forklift, but I'd like to be able to train the forklift drivers, because I've
Hmm.
noticed, now you're opening yourself up a little bit more because you do have those skill sets. You could be a lance corporal and you can be in charge of a PFC, and you can be telling that private first class what to do. So now not only are you a driver or took care of all of this equipment, but now you can supervise.
Right.
You're a supervisor. I mean, as low as down in the total pool as you can get, you're a supervisor.
Right.
So again, where are all of these skill sets on your resume when you go and apply for a job? Because we had to do it. We didn't do just, if you think we did one job, we didn't do just one job.
Yeah. But
Multiple
one
jobs.
that, because getting back to like when you were talking about the other hat and when you had gotten out, and they were like, oh well, you're not qualified for this, you're not qualified for that. Um, there's an opposite end of the spectrum, because when I originally got out, I didn't want to do electronics, didn't want to touch it. So the funny thing is, I went into sales in a little small mom and pop Christian bookstore, and did sales, and then had they were open later at night, and then they realized, okay, well, we really can't be open that late at night because we're not making enough money to do it.
Right.
So I just was like, well, I know who's on the chopping block because I'm at
Mm-hmm.
night. I'm part of that night crew, and I knew they were going to cut back. And so I went looking for a job. And I said, well, I've got all this electronics experience. And I looked and found all these places that were looking for people with electronics experience. And you know what happened to me with every one of these things that I filled out resumes for?
You didn't get the job.
No, I didn't. And you know why?
That wasn't meant to be. I
Well,
don't know, Joe.
that's
Yeah.
true too. It wasn't meant to be. But
Nothing just happens.
you know what they told me?
What's that?
You have too much experience.
Oh, you were
Yeah,
overqualified.
you're sorry, you're
Oh, I've heard that
overqualified.
so many
And
times.
it's like there is no such thing as overqualified.
Yeah.
And I the last place that I was at, I looked at the gentleman and I said, here's the deal. I want a foot in, and that's it. I said, I don't care if you have me picking up garbage that I'm overqualified for.
Mm.
But when it comes down the road that you need somebody who's qualified for that position, I'm already here.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
But it's
That happens.
you
Happens
you
all the time.
and he's like, well, yeah, but we know that you're
Mm.
looking at it and you'll want to get paid X amount because so and so that
Right. Oh
is has
man.
less experience than you at electronics is getting paid this. And I said, no, you don't understand. I said, there are those of us, and most of the ones that I've run across are military people, is we just want to get in the door,
Yeah.
you know, and we have the experience.
Yeah.
The like you said, the good thing is, well, I ended up going. I had a gentleman Marine um,
Hoorah.
that
Yeah.
was doing sales at a auto auction, and he said, "Look, they need drivers," and so I ended up doing that. Well, I ended up a driver for about 2 weeks delivering
Yeah.
cars, and then they went, "Hey, would you like to be a vehicle inspector?" I said, "I rode up military aircraft for almost 11 years. I'm pretty sure I can ride up a
Well,
car."
see, there you go. You got the experience. Those of you who have not been in the military, and maybe you're just younger right now, maybe in high school or whatever. You can volunteer at places to where you can get experience and
Mhm.
stuff, because where you have too much experience, you also have no experience. So they're gonna get you coming or going either way you look at it. And Charles made a good point when somebody said, "Well, you're too overqualified." Well, here's the problem, Charles, is that maybe you were looking at companies that don't deserve you. Maybe you could have been looking at, like, Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or something like that, a bigger company. because then you might have had more than ample experience to be able to get a good job. And this is where some of us cut ourselves short right here, is that because we got turned down and we were told we have too much experience, and all we really needed to do is get in the door, like you said, get in the door. But you got to understand, in an employer's perspective, this brings back a lot of flashbacks for when I was working in workforce development for. Actually, I worked in workforce development for 17 years, and I saw these things all the time. I saw the employers. The employers, they too have a budget that they work with. You know, if they've projected their budget out 4 or 5 years, and you're over here telling them I'll do anything, they know that you may quit on them within the next 4 or 5 years, because that's the closest amount of time they have potentially in bringing you in. So it's not that they don't want you. It's not that you're not valuable to them. It's just that they've got their own stuff that they're doing as well too. So you have to think about it that way too. So I guess the bottom line for me in thinking that way is that maybe that employer is just lower than what you should be going up to.
Hmm.
You should be taking up that next level. And don't ever think that you cannot take that next level, because experience is security is the ability to be able to perform. And if you got all these things and you don't want to do it, McDonald's did not hire me. You think anybody else going to hire me? Well, McDonald's is a low totem pole. You want to go to the next higher, and you
Right.
have to have enough G2 per se to be able to make that decision, that determination. You know, you can go to organizations that have workforce development assistance and help that you can go, and anybody can do this. It doesn't have to be a veteran. It could be a spouse. It could be whomever, and you can go to these places. I remember when I got out, and I'm flashing back a little bit, I went to the unemployment office, and the unemployment office gave me an ultimatum. They said, you've got to go look for these jobs. They gave me a list of jobs. You got to go and apply for these jobs. Okay, well, good. I'll go and apply for them. And you cannot have any unemployment insurance until you report back and give us your status. This was back in the days. It's changed a little bit since
It's
then,
changed a lot since
but
then.
the process is still almost identical, because when you go to some of these organizations, that's what they still practice. They'll give you job listings and they'll hand them to you, and they'll say, try that. They'll sit with you for a few minutes and they'll talk to you and they'll try to get your skill set, and they get all this information from you, and all your experience and all that, right? And then they go out to the computer, the old trusty computer, and they pull out all these job listings, and they say, well, this job would be good for you. Go here, try this one. This job could be good for you. Try that one. And then you go on your merry own way, Charles, and you just say, well, let me go look for this. And maybe you call once or twice, nobody called, nobody returned your call. You get stuck, and here you are. What you're Number one, you're already unmotivated to begin with. The organization that said, I'm here to help you, really did not help you, because if they were going to help you, they would bring you in and they would say, well, maybe you need training, or maybe you need this, or maybe, in other words, they're spending a little bit more time with you as opposed to just giving you a job listing. And some of us, think that we can do everything on our own. And, that's the way we are. We can do our own job listings. We can do this on our own and stuff. But, the bottom line is that if you really, 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 really want to know how to get a job, and I've done this for many, many years, and I've talked to many, many, many job seekers of all different type of skill sets, from CEOs to uh, general people that did general work, employers that were supervisors, general managers, accountants that consider themselves being an accountant when they really weren't an accountant, because they didn't have the documents to prove that they had an accountant certificate.
Right.
They became accountant by default, working in a company for a long time, and the company trusted them enough to give them the books, to do the balancing, to do the budget and all that. That's where they considered themselves to be an accountant. And that's why when they were let go from that company, the first thing in their mind was, well, I've been doing all this accounting work, all this budgeting, I've been taking care of the money and all that. I'll go and apply for a accounting job. And they go and apply for a accounting job and they wouldn't get hired. And the reason they wouldn't get hired is because that paper kept them. That paper meaning the certificate. They kept them from getting their job because here's the thing: if you were an employer and I came to you, Charles, and I says I want an accounting job, I've got X amount of years of experience. I did the books, I did this, I did that, and I feel I could do the job. I read the job description, I meet all the criteria, and you look at me and you say, well, let me see your certificate. Where did you go to school? I mean, I didn't go to school. I just, by default, I became the accountant in the company for 10 years. And that's what all I've been doing for 10 years. Because of your liability, because of your insurance, because of your inability to be able to say, or ability to be able to tell me no. And it's not because you like my experience, you like everything I have to offer. But if something happens with the accounting, you hired somebody that wasn't qualified, then it's on the employer.
Right.
And this is where we get stuck at. This is where employers say, I really don't want to take that. I like you. You're a good person. It sounds like you got a lot of experience. Sounds like you got this. So the alternative here, Charles, is to be if you're working with an organization, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a workforce service development office, it could be a career center or whomever. They should be able to evaluate that 10 years of experience and tell you almost immediately, well, we need to hurry up and get you into a training program to get you that certificate.
Right.
Because now they're not giving you a list of jobs to go look. Now they're helping you. And this is for anyone. And you don't have to have been in the military. This is for anyone. Now they know you've got experience, but you don't have the paper. And it is not a 4-year college degree or anything like that you have to go to school. It's a certificate. It may take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months to complete, but now you've got the proof and you have the experience behind that. So that helped you out. And then you go back to the employer and ask him or her, hey, is this position filled? I now have my credentials. And because you have the experience tied into that, then now you have a potential job. And
Mhm.
it may have taken you a little bit of time to get there, but it kind of helped you out a lot because now you're not unemployed for the past 6 months. Now you're unemployed for only 3 months. But it had to have taken someone who would really have had special training, care, and attention to tend to your needs and not just send you off with the list and expect for you to go fend for yourself because we're not going to fend for ourselves. We're not going to, we're human beings. If you don't help me, if it doesn't get me anywhere, I'm not going back to you. I'm not. And this is the way, this is what happens a lot. I know I've seen it. I've been there. I did it for many, many, many years. And I used to have a crew of case managers. And that was my pet peeve for the case managers is that number one, when you have somebody come to your door, they walked in and you had an appointment with them at 10 o'clock in the morning. It is now 10:20 or 10:15. You still see them. Well, they say, what if they're late? And I got an appointment. Blah, blah, I don't care. You still see them because they're looking for a job. They don't have any money. First of all, they don't have any money. They may have used up their last transportation ride from a neighbor or a friend, and that neighbor or friend didn't get him there on time. And that was their only hope to get him to the place where they were looking for a job. And we have the audacity to be able to say, well, you're 10 minutes late, you're 15 minutes late, I'm sorry. That is not a right thing to do. So if a case manager is really looking after your interest and really wants to help you out, they'll consider the fact that, hey, things happen. You don't have the money. You can't even get here in the bus. I get it. I get it. Let's bring you in. Let's work with you. When you start working with case managers like that, you know that they're good because there are other case managers that don't work that way. They're, oh, I'm sorry, you're 5 minutes late. I told you to be here at 10. It's 10:01. That's impossible for somebody to be able to say, oh, well, it happens. I've seen it happen. And it's not a good thing because you're a job seeker. You're looking for work. You're looking for guidance. You're looking for direction. And it's one of these things to where you can say, gosh darn it. I mean, I didn't mean to be late. That may have been your only transportation that you had. may
Yeah.
have been your only transportation.
Mine is I look at it also from the other perspective is if you have a person who is habitually late and they have the opportunity and the means to get there, they don't want it the job. So
Well, and that's true.
that's the one that you go,
Well,
no, I'm sorry, I don't have time to. I have other people who are struggling to get here and who are fighting to get here and want the job, but obviously
mm,
you're not
right.
in that boat. And
No,
it's,
I agree.
you have that same thing when we were in the
I
military. I what we call people who are road
oh yeah, and
retired on active duty, and it's like, yeah, that's the last person I want to take out on the line with me to get anything done because
yeah,
they don't want to do anything. They're, they become a bump on a log or a worthless,
yeah,
individual. But it's,
yeah.
those who want to learn it, and I understand,
Yeah,
where you're going with that.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. There's always going to be that 10%, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe in some cases 20% of individuals who are going to be like Charles described it, and you can't help that. And if you've helped that person a couple of times and they're motivated and they're late, then I can see that you bring them in, you help them. But if you've helped that person several times, chances are that you've already had that conversation with them, and they won't be back or they won't be late.
Mm-hmm.
If you've already had that conversation with them, because all it takes is a couple of bits is to say, look, I got a big, gigantic 300 member or 300 people caseload,
Yeah.
and I don't have the time. And you as a case manager, if you're a case manager, if you're listening, it's your responsibility to lay down the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's your responsibility to say, look, because you get busy too. You get tied up. You have not only do you have to take the time to review if you and interview people, but you have to do your documentation. You have to do your assistance. You have to go to your meetings. You have to go to lunch. You have to go on your breaks. That's got to happen, and you can't bypass that. So when you bring your person in that's looking for a job, these people are looking for jobs, and you got to let them know right off the bat. Look, here's my rules. Our policy is this, but these are my rules because I have a big caseload and we need to work together. You now belong to
Right.
me. And that's pretty much the bottom line on that. And that's if you guys are case managers and stuff. And you also have to look at the validity of these job postings that people give you. Are they really, I mean, I can pull out a job listing posting right now that give me all of the requirements that I have as I'm reading through it and stuff. It could be a month old or 2 months old or maybe 3 months old. Who knows? A lot of employers, and if you're an employer, we got your number. We know you're posting jobs that you don't have. I know that because you just want to make sure that people know that you're an employer that helps people, that wants to hire people. But I've looked at you. I've looked at your internet or your what do they call it, website and all that, and you only got 5 people in your whole place. You're putting all these job postings out. What is it that you're putting them out for and stuff? Because when we're looking for jobs, we don't have time to be half stepping, especially if we have a family. We need to have to make sure because upon getting hiring, once you do accept a job from somebody, it's going to take 2, maybe 3 weeks, maybe even sometimes a month before you get your first paycheck. You know that, Charles? It's not going to happen unless there's a job that's automatically, it's got that money every week. They're going to pay you
Yeah.
every week and you got it. That's okay. But, we're talking about a job that you're going to like because there's a job and there's the job. You can ask me what an A job is. What is an what is an A job, Justin?
Obviously, Jesse, you want me to ask you what an A
What
job
is an A
is.
job? I want to.
What is an A job?
It's any job. A
Any
job.
job.
A job. Any
Any
job.
job.
Any job. A job. I mean, you took it. You jumped in on it. You needed to put bread and butter on the table. You had to pay your bills, so you took a job. A
Okay.
job. You're not excited about it, but it's a job. And then there's the job.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask me what a D job is.
Well, I figure the job is that's the
The job
job that
is the
you
job.
really, really want. That's
Yeah.
going to help you put not only bread and butter on the table, but some bacon and maybe some
Oh yeah,
steak, or
maybe throw in
get you enough so you have coffee every
yeah,
morning when
salt
you
and
get up.
pepper, yeah, the whole yeah, the job. But do you know that a lot of people overlook this? that an A job could potentially become the job?
That's true.
You know, when people are looking for employments and they go to the interview and there's two or three people waiting for that interview, and only one's going to be able to make it, right? And you get selected by virtue of saying, "Hey, you did very good. You know, we're looking to hire in the next 2 weeks. You know, are you? When can you become available?" And so on. They're already spiking you up to have that job. You know, you're like all excited, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm right in there," and they liked me, and my resume was good. Everything was right on time. And then all of a sudden, you get this call, and they say, "Well, I want to let you know, Mr. Smith, is that we really admire your ability to be able to do all the stuff that you do, and so on and so on. However, at this point, we have hired from within." That
Hmm.
phrase comes in all the time, and guess where that within came from?
Somebody who is working
Somebody who
a
had
job.
a job
Well,
who
like I
got in.
right, like I talked about earlier, where I was looking for electronics and had a Marine say, "Hey, we need some drivers at the auto auction," and that's what I did for 2 weeks. He
Yeah,
said,
there you
"Just
go.
while you're looking for a job,
Yeah, get a
get you
job.
some money,"
Yeah.
and that was a job. And they said, "Hey, um, we'll send you to school if you
Mm,
want to be work here as a vehicle inspector."
yeah.
And the amount of money I was getting as a vehicle inspector was a whole heck of a lot more, and it was the job. It
Yeah.
was, and it that was the job that brought me back to
There you
North
go.
Carolina, because I was out in California. I was in Northern California working at an
Wow.
auto auction, and um, my parents said, "Hey, look, you haven't been home in 10, 11 years.
Hmm.
We'll fly you back home to visit." And I came back to North Carolina to visit them. And it was, you know, hey, I don't want to be in Northern California. I want to be close to family.
Yeah,
So,
well, see, that's a godsend there. I mean, that's something that happens it happens because that's the way it was meant to be. You know, job listings are okay to some extent. If they're as long as they're current, they're okay. But the best way to do it is to go identify a company that you really want to work for. I don't care how big of a company it is. It could be, I mentioned earlier, Lockheed Martin, or somebody about that big, or go to the county, your local county, or go to the state jobs, or go to the federal jobs, even as far as maybe deciding to join the military, maybe. But these jobs, these companies, these city, the states, the federal, and counties, these are all these are all jobs that if you find a job to jump in on
hmm
get your foot in the door,
hmm
even if it's like a receptionist or maybe you're cleaning the floors or something like that, understand that those jobs are those type of organizations and companies are self-contained, that they have every single type of employment from within. They have everything. They have supervisors, managers, directors, CEOs. They go from God, it could be a police department, it could be a medical facility, it could be they have everything from within those organizations. So can you imagine the wealth of information that you can get by just jumping in, stepping into the doors, and then identifying what department you like, really what you want to work for, what a department that you say, if I was to work here for the rest of my life, that's where I would want to work. And then as having that beginner job, venture out and talk to these people that work in these places, in these positions and stuff, and ask them questions like, how long have you been here? How did it take you to get here? What did you have to do to earn this job? What kind of credentials do you need? What kind of training do you need? And all that stuff. And identify that you can actually do that, because that's how. And I've known hundreds of people. I've sent hundreds of people to trainings that got them in the door and got them going to the point to where now they can find themselves getting from a job to the job, and they don't even have to move. It's just like being in the military for 23 years. I didn't have all I had to do was continue to extend. And guess what was happening all along? I was getting promoted. I was getting, Lance Corporal PF or PFC, Lance Corporal, Corporal Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant, and all these years. And I'm no longer a driver, by the way, by the time I get to that point. Now I'm doing, and you're doing, I'm sure you have, and your spouse has done it too. And your spouse, if she's looking for a job, and you've been in the military all this time, and your spouse have had to stay home and take care of the kids and take care of the budgeting and be a negotiator, be a cook, I mean, the amount of skill sets that you have gotten just by virtue of being a part of the veteran, now a veteran, but of the military, you've you've gone in there and you've gone, explored all your options and identified areas where you could potentially get into.
Right.
So, theoretically speaking, you can get yourself a job, and if it's training that you want to get into, there's a thing called the ETPL. That's an acronym for the Employment Training Panel List. Every country in the United States has a workforce development organization that's run by your state that has the ability for people to go in if you're looking for jobs to be able to ask for that list, or you can do it yourself. Just go Google it. ETPL for North Carolina, ETPL for Texas, ETPL. I think Texas, they call it Texas Works, I think. They all have their own terminology,
Hmm.
but you can go in there and you can identify the potential training providers that are paid for by the federal government, by the federal government. They get grants and stuff to train people to learn jobs. You can be an accountant, you become a certified nurse, a registered nurse. I mean, we're talking now being able to explore those options. And they have youth programs out there for youth as well. If you're looking as a youth, you're looking to get into a credential, or you get a credential so you can get into a job, you can do that as well too, Charles. I mean, there's all kinds of activities that we do have to do a lot of that footwork
Yeah.
because sometimes if you're unmotivated and you don't want to work or deal with a service provider because they're not giving you what you need and they don't call you back or something. I mean, and it happens. It's not, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Stuff like this just happen. And you have to be aware of that and stuff. So got to remember too that there's supervisors for every job. So if you're in a job and later on the supervisor happens to be promoted to go up to another position or higher level, and you've met the criteria to jump into those steps right there, into those footsteps, you have the ability to be able to build and build and
Right.
build. Not only to move up, but also to get a little bit more money to help you out a little bit more because people don't land in those positions because they're just hanging out. But here's the thing is that you have to be motivated enough. You have to commit yourself to know and to understand that in order for everything to work out for you or for anybody who's looking for a job is that you have to be able to do the work. You have to be able to commit, you have to be able to be loyal, you have to be able to have interest. Because let's say you're working for the state and you start off as a receptionist, and then you go into a case manager, and then you go into a supervisor position, and then you go into a director, and then you go into a director of operations, and then you keep climbing and climbing. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I have seen people do that from a janitor. Used to be a janitor, now they're called, I get maintenance specialist or something like that, or sanitary specialists. They're not janitors anymore. So from that all the way up to be an investigator for a youth program or for fraud or for any of that. Sky's the limit, pretty much, when you go into these type of areas that I'm talking about, the city, the state, the federal government, or even with your county. And you know what comes behind that? If you're with them long enough, you can actually retire to them. The regular Joe positions that you go to, the sometimes through the stores, so you work through grocery stores or whatever. Sometimes they keep you for a while and they let you go. You work for a nonprofit organization, understand that you're going to be working under grant guidance. So they got a grant to hire you, but if that grant goes away, guess what's going to happen to you? You may end up going away unless you build yourself up to a point to where now you're you're the one that's doing that grant, that's implementing and all that. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of things that you can do. Go to your state website. Go to your employment training ATPL employment training panel list and break out everything from driver to I mean they HVAC. They've got carpenters. They've got electricians. All of these type of trainings, but most of these trainings you have to go through the one stop or through the career centers in order to be able to sign up for it so they can
Right.
bring you on board and stuff.
Well,
But it happens.
one that you had mentioned, like with the janitors. Well, who better out there than somebody who's been in the military? Because
Just well,
let's face it, we've cleaned more things. Probably,
toilet bowls and
probably with
urinals.
you in the Marine Corps. I know we had to do it when I was in basic training in tech school. Hospital corners where they could bounce a quarter off
Yeah,
your
of the rack.
off your rack to make
Yeah,
sure that
it was
Uh,
tight.
we had in tech school, our floors were so bad because buildup of wax. We had to take razor blades and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
scrape the floors. We did janitorial stuff that most janitors will never touch, will never see
That's
in the United States military. So you do have that training too. Put that
yeah,
on your resume too.
yeah,
Janitor, you've
yeah,
done it.
yeah.
How many schools while you're in did you go through? I know we
Oh,
did like,
I didn't even touch
yeah,
that. I didn't even
see,
touch
because
your
I
trainings.
remember
Oh my God.
NCO preparatory school, Airman Leadership School, NCO Leadership School, Supervisor School, just over and over again. And like mine is, with the whole electronics things, we did soldering, high reliability soldering. I did soldering on stuff that most people, of course, now you have a lot of machines and stuff that do it, will never touch, and it's all technical. And
Yeah,
you're looking at your soldering job with an eye loop to make sure it's
yeah,
exactly correct. Of course, there's a lot of machines that do that
yeah.
now, but it's like you were talking about with me. Why didn't I reach out to Lockheed and some of these
Well,
well, I thought about those, and I had, because we had civilians that actually worked for Lockheed,
mm,
especially at Beale with the U-2 and the SR-71, that said, "Hey, we can get you a job." Yeah, but then I would have had to move to Southern California, and that was my other thing, is I was looking for something in the local area,
yeah.
which,
Well, you have
you
to
know,
take that into
yeah,
consideration because if you have family and you have to move around and stuff, but here's the thing. I mean, here's the bottom line before we do our closing here is that first of all, if you're currently employed right now and something about what we're talking about kind of strikes a nerve, then it behooves for you to pursue it and stuff. But don't ever quit your job before you have another job. Don't ever let your job go because you have a job, and something else you think might come up. As a result of that, you end up quitting your job, and you don't want to do that because this might come up, may not fruition for you. It may not come up, and I've been in situations as a supervisor, manager, and program manager to where I've had to tell people, "I am so sorry, we didn't get this grant after all," and you're sitting there waiting 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and not even pursuing another job because I mean we've almost pretty much given you the go, and
hmm
it happens all the time, but things do happen and stuff. Case managers are a dime a dozen. Case managers are there's a probably about 18 different definitions for a case manager. If you want to apply for some sort of a case manager position, you have to be specific, you have to be focused, and you have to identify what case manager type of position do you want to be because they have case managers for everything. Everybody's a case manager. Everybody's a case manager pretty much. And understand too that technology nowadays, I'm the MS DOS kind of guy. I'm back in the days when they used to tell me I got mail. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, where
And
you have to come home and turn on the
yeah,
computer
and
and
go
wait
have go
wait
have
15 minutes
go have
for
3 or 4
everything to
cups of
warm
coffee
up.
and come back and make sure that little blink, 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 and then when it says MS DOS on that thing, and they were like this huge, this big, we wouldn't carry him. We'd have to bring him in on a dolly or something, put him down. But AI, Chat GPT, and all that stuff that's going on right now, there's no joke. This is happening right now.
Yeah.
People are really, really getting into this kind of stuff because that is what's here today, and don't overlook that. I mean, I have to kind of overlook it because it's way beyond my capacity of even thinking about it. I could have a clone next to me. Well, I don't know what'll happen if I did that, but the bottom line is that,
Hopefully they're not cloning you, Jesse.
uh,
That's we.
well, AI kind of makes you think, artificial intelligence, kind of like, oh, wow, we're going from outer space now. But you know what? Those kind of things are really serious things to look at because there's a lot of practice, not only in the federal government, states, everybody is practicing these kind of things right now. And maybe that would be something that if you're much younger, a younger generation, and you're into the technology field and stuff, maybe that's something that you may want to pay a little bit closer attention to because who knows? Who knows? Uh, and keep in mind too that for the longest amount of time that I can remember, Social Security. I know there's a different matter here, but it has to do with this. Social Security was going to go away back when I was a little boy. I could remember my mom and my dad saying, "I'm going to lose my Social Security," not my grandma and grandpa, and so on and so on. I mean, here I am right now, at the age that I'm at now. Social Security is booming, big time. How do you get Social Security? When you are employed by an employer, a little bit of money comes out of your check all the time. You'll never see it. You will never even know it's gone. But when you become of age, when you get to the point to where now you can draw Social Security, understand that it's a possibility that because you've had jobs all along and they've been withdrawing money, it depends on the quarters that you make while you were employed as to how much money you're going to receive in the long run. But it's also used in another factor too. If something was to happen to you along the way and you could no longer be employed, you can always resort back to Social Security.
Right. Social Security
So,
disability.
so it works. It works both ways for you, and it's about getting the job because, like we mentioned earlier, like it says on the title, a job is a job, is a job is a job, and we hope that everyone that tunes into this got something out of this. And I think we only have maybe one announcement right now, special announcement because it's something that might be very beneficial to a lot of you.
Well,
So,
before we go away, there was something that we were talking about at the beginning of it, looking back at veterans and time frames and who were the first veterans, but Cold War veterans. And I know there are a lot of Cold War veterans. And the reason why I know there are a lot of Cold War veterans is because from September 2nd, 1945 to December 26th, 1991, in between that time frame are all considered Cold War veterans. And the reason why it's that is because it recognized the Cold War and not direct combat between two superpowers, United States and the Soviet Union. And so from the September 2nd, 1945 to December 26th, 1991, you're considered a Cold War veteran. And there's actual recognition for that. There's a it's in accordance with Section 1084 of the fiscal year 1998 National Defense Authorization Act. The Secretary of Defense, which is now Secretary of War, which is so much better, approved awarding the Cold War Recognition Certificate to all members of the armed forces and qualified federal government civilian personnel who faithfully and honorably served the United States any time during Cold War era, which is defined as September 2nd, 1945 to December 26th, 1991 are eligible. And what I will try to do is later on in the comments for this one, there's an address. So you can go on that. I'll try to put the link in there so you can look it up if you want to get a Cold War certificate. Um,
yeah,
and you're in between
pay
those,
for the
you have
asking.
served in between those time frames, because you
And
got
we're
to.
talking millions of folks are
Oh yeah,
eligible for this. A
because
lot of
you have to
folks.
look at end
Yeah.
of World War II. So if
Yeah.
people who were still
I hear
around
you.
from there, you had Korea. You have Vietnam, the Vietnam era. You have Gulf War era. Is Vietnam and Gulf War
Yeah.
are included in that
Well, there
time
you go.
frame. So there's quite a few people
Yeah,
who are
millions of
who are
folks.
in there.
Yeah, well,
Jesse, anything else?
I think I'm good to go. Would like for you guys to subscribe.
Like, subscribe, and share.
Like, subscribe, and share, like Charles says. And we hope you have a great, blessed week. And we'll see you again every Tuesday, 11 o'clock. If something changes, we will notify. God bless. Have a great day.
Love y'all. Remember, peace, love.